Hey, I'm Sean Litvak, and this is a special Wednesday, yes, Wednesday night edition at 7 p.m. Eastern of Litvak Leadership Live with my special guest today, Tony Young. How you doing, Tony?
I'm doing good, Sean. Thanks for having me on your program.
I am so excited to have you here. You are so educated in something that is so important to all of us. And not only are you educated in it, but you are classically trained. Yes, I'm talking about that life-giving resource, water. And I was expecting, like, I don't know, fireworks or confetti to shoot out at that point. If I had better special effects, that's what we would have. So Tony, you and I have known each other a long time. And as I was looking at can you believe we've known each other a long time? We've known each other that long that I can say that now?
Yeah, decades.
At
Oh,
least a
yeah,
decade.
two,
At
nearly.
least,
Yeah.
at least a decade. And as far as I can recall, you have always been involved with water. So I guess my first question is, and there's my cousin Sari. She's the first one to post a comment. You go, Sari. And Sari was a great interview. Probably not as good as you're going to be today, but she was a great interview. So why water? Because looking over your LinkedIn and looking at your resume that I produced from LinkedIn and looking at your education, it's water, water, and more water. So what is it with water that has just intrigued you
Well,
as I take a sip?
yeah, you take a sip. I did not start out in water. I started out in highways. I went to college at Western for my undergrad, and I was under a scholarship with the transportation cabinet
Okay.
and with a highways focus. And when I got out, I worked for the highway department for several years, and I found that the pace of the designs for highway projects is very slow. I'm more of a kind of like you, where we like to keep moving quickly, right? So projects that take years or decades are really, really. Uh, I found that
Boring.
it was, yeah, we'll go with boring. It was challenging to keep focus. So I took a stint off from engineering, and when I came back, um, I put out, I think, 42 resumes to different firms in Louisville, just shotgun approach.
Okay.
And the responses were, "Oh, you've been trained in stormwater because stormwater design is a part of transportation.
Yes.
On roads without getting the creeks under the roads and get the water off the roads." And so really I just kind of stumbled into water because there was a lot of design going on for water in the Kentuckian area, and there was a need for people who understood drainage. And so I left behind the transportation part of my education and
Okay.
focused on the drainage portion.
So you bring up drainage, and and you were in highways. So it begs the question, why does water sometimes sit on the highway if they've been engineered to drain and cause hydroplaning? I mean, the engineers and the construction workers, and you see them working on the road. I live in southern in Indiana, and you see where it seems like forever I-65 is under construction. I mean, what causes that? I mean, is it people dumping trash and plugging up holes in the road?
Well, there's a couple of things going on there. One, first is there is a design storm. So there is a design event that says, okay, we expect this much water in this period of time.
Okay.
If it comes faster than that, it's going to pond. That's just bottom line. And so classical stormwater design from 20 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, we used what might be considered you might call a 20-year storm. And that
All
20
right.
year storm does not mean it only happens 1% once every 20 years. It means it has a 5% chance of happening any given year, because 100 divided by 5 is 20. So
Simple math.
you're right. So we classically designed for that event.
Okay.
Now, as the expectations of the citizens has increased, their expectations are higher, your expectations are higher.
Sure.
We have gone to what's called a PMP, probable maximum precipitation, or PME, probable maximum event. So in this case, with the newer designs we're doing now, we're saying, okay, what's the worst case scenario? And so we have models that will tell us, okay, we need a 12-inch pipe here for the 20-year storm. But if we have a PMP, the probable maximum event, we might need a 15-inch. So at this point, we're designing for a higher level event, which might be called classically the 100-year or 500-year storm. We just call it a PMP now. So you will notice, I think, on most of your newer roads, you don't have that issue. Now, I-65 is from the 50s. It was designed to not be overtopped by the 100-year event.
Okay.
But other than that, it was not designed to shed water for the 100-year event. It was probably sheds water for the 10-year event, or maybe even the 5-year event. And beyond that, you're going to get hydroplaning. So one of the issues with hydroplaning in particular, and then I'll go back to the base question about the trash and stuff. The amount of water you can shed off a road, if you think about it, is the side slope on the road, right?
Right.
So but you also have to balance that, especially in the areas where you get freezing temperatures. So anything north of the Tennessee of the Georgia border or Alabama border, you have to balance that with, okay, we can make it this steep, but when it freezes, our car is going to start sliding off the road as the rain does in the summer, or the car is going to do it in the winter.
And the road needs to appear level as you're driving on it too.
Well, they aren't level. They have a slope to them, typically 2 to 5%. But if you got up to 10%, so you could shed these, let's say you could shed the 100-year storm with a 10% slope. Well, on an icy surface, a car will slide on a 10% slope and just slide right off the road.
Oh my.
So, and that's not much slope. That 10% is not a lot of, it's not a steep grade at all.
No.
So you have to balance those two things. So to go back to your question about the storm drains and the trash, typically it's not trash in the sense of litter. What clogs storm drains most of the time is tree debris, leaves, branches that were blown off in a wind, because we put grates on these things. We put grates on these larger pipes. If the pipe's probably bigger than 18 inches, it probably has a grate over it. Maybe if it's bigger than 12 inches, it has a grate over it. Those grates are to keep kids out, to keep animals out. And the downside of those grates is they get blocked by debris. So when that stream starts to flood, like the one behind my house or the one down the street from your house starts to flood, it catches everything that the windstorm knocked down, and that rolls on down the creek until it gets to the road. So when it gets to the road, there's a pipe there. Well, the pipe's got a smaller cross section than the creek does. And a lot of times that tree limb or whatever blocks it. And so it starts to pond. And so you can have that on a creek that crosses under the road. And you can have the same problem on the ditches on the side of the road, or on an interstate on the ditches in between the lanes of the road, like the divided highway has a ditch down the center. It can get clogged up as well. Not necessarily from tree debris, but a lot of times it'll get clogged up just from the grass debris. You know, they only mow twice a year now. We used to mow a lot more often, but we only mow about twice a year now. And so when you mow, you get a large accumulation of debris that can flow down, get washed down, and clog a drain. So that's the short answer.
So, ask an engineer a question, and then he says after 3 minutes, that's the short answer. That's great.
Right?
So let's talk a little bit about, and this is a problem that I think is kind of a silent nature killer erosion, and I saw that you have done some work in the past to inhibit erosion. Um, where is, is erosion just because of the rain beating on things and we have to divert the water in another way? Why is erosion something that we should be concerned about?
Well, there's a couple of things there. One, the issue of erosion is a function of not how hard it's raining. It's more of a function of what's the quality of the surface that the rain is hitting.
Okay.
So you have an impervious surface, say like your concrete driveway.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter how hard it rains; it's not going to erode.
Right.
If you have a garden plot or a freshly seeded lawn that you've just prepped, and you get a gully washer, you're going to lose all that seed and all the straw, and the soil is going to go down and erode into the stream system. Now, this is problematic for a multitude of reasons. One is that soil will keep moving until the stream slows down. So if it's washing down a gully or a ditch in your yard to the creek, once it gets to the creek, it might settle out and it's going to create a blockage or a constriction in the creek. And so that's a problem locally, but more globally or nationally, all the erosion that we have that happens in the Ohio River Valley ultimately ends up in the Gulf Coast out by New Orleans.
So I had no idea.
Yeah, it goes down the Ohio, then down the Mississippi. And that's what the Mississippi Delta is. It is erosion of soil from up here down to the Gulf. And that, while that has gone on, as long as the good Lord's had rivers, there's been erosion. But what makes it more detrimental in this day and age is we have a lot of nutrients in our soil now that we didn't then. And by nutrients, I mean feces, debris, rotting vegetation, fertilizer we put on our farms, fertilizer we put on our yards. When all of that washes down into the Gulf, it creates what's known as the Gulf hypoxia zone, which is hypoxia is an absence of oxygen.
Okay.
And creates basically a dead zone. Now, this problem was originally seen and solved at the Chesapeake Bay decades ago, and so now we have our own in the Gulf. And so the more we can do to manage that runoff and slow that erosion, the quicker the Gulf will restore itself and solve this hypoxia zone. I'll give you an interesting example. So if you go to Alabama Gulf Coast,
okay,
it's beautiful, right? It's clear, the water's clear.
Yeah, vacation land.
Go 200 miles west, 300 miles west. Go to Galveston, same Gulf of Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
Yet the water's murky.
Yeah,
the water's murky. It has an odor to it, and the sand is different too. The sand is so hard you can drive on it, you can ride your bicycle on it. It's almost like a compacted material that you would pave over. So the only difference between these two areas is the predominant stream channel coming out of the Mississippi River into the Gulf of Mexico goes to the right instead of the left. So the sediment that's coming out of the Mississippi River is washing down towards Louisiana, Texas, and on points west, and that is creating the dirty water. It's not really dirty; it's just cloudy.
So let's talk about dirty water a second.
Okay.
So I've got here this lovely bottle of bottled water that the label fell off of, and people get all in a tizzy over the price of gasoline, But when you figure out the cost of water per gallon when you're, buying bottles or whatever, I mean, what goes on to make water potable that it's so expensive?
Well, tap water is potable and it's not expensive. It normally runs nationally 5 to 10 cents a gallon.
Oh,
That's
okay.
money. Um, the bottled water is expensive simply to pay for the packaging and the shipping.
That's
But
it.
that's it. That's it. They're typically using tap water. They'll use tap water and they'll add. Sometimes they'll add a little extra disinfectant, and sometimes they'll just add a little extra oxygen. They'll bubble it. One of the best ways to make water taste better is to bubble some air through it.
And why is that?
Um, Oxygen cleans water. The other thing is that bubbling any gas through water, and we always just use oxygen because it's available, and air because it's available. If you bubble air through water, it causes circulation and it helps to pull the other gases out of the water that we don't like methane and things like that stink. So actually, if you ever see these ponds on the side of the road where it's starting to get green and algae, the best thing they could do is put a bubbler in there and get it oxygenating so that the oxygen level goes up, and then the good bugs can eat the green algae and the other things
Okay.
that it's once again it's a hypoxic zone. It's a zone that doesn't have good oxygenation.
So you hear some of the, we'll call it climate change. Um, um, what word do I want to use? Those that are very concerned about climate change, we'll just call them that. Say that our water is going to be gone. It's going to be burned off, where we are polluting everything. Yet you say that we can bubble the water into purification. I'm sure there's more to making it potable than that. But is this something that we should really be concerned about?
Well, there's two. When we say water, there's a multitude of definitions. One
Okay.
is the water coming out of our faucets, and we say, you know, that water, there is no shortage in this area. What there's a shortage of is not there's not a water shortage. There's a clean water shortage.
Okay.
Isn't that right? So even where you have people are dying of thirst, there's typically water. You just can't drink it because it's not clean enough. So, or it's ocean water and it's salty. So I feel like my personal opinion is most of the issues we have with water are a reflection of our reluctance to pay what it costs to have clean water. All
And
right.
what is that? What does it cost to have clean water? What do we need to pay?
Well, it depends on how dirty it is.
Okay.
But most of the time, a dime a gallon, 15 cents a gallon. I mean, you can pull water out of the Ohio River
Right.
and clarify it, settle it, put some bleach in it, and send it on down the pipe. And it's some of the best water in the country. Now, if we were pulling that same water out of a less clean, let's say a lake, lakes used to be where we got all of our water, but we've
Okay.
learned that the decay of the leaves. You know how when you go by a dam in the fall and sometimes it smells really bad, like sulfur.
Yes.
That's the leaves and the rotten wood decaying, and then it turns over when the weather gets cold, and that sulfur and stink comes up. So we used to use that water, but now we use mostly river water because it's always flowing, so it's much cleaner. But the answer to the bottom question is for typically 10 or 20 cents a gallon, we could make clean water out of just about any water that's out there, whether it's seawater or whether it's sewage water. In fact, there's a lot of communities now that are in the west of the Mississippi that are treating their wastewater to a degree that they can put it back into the treatment plant for their potable water, and it's almost a closed loop. So typically, like, well, in the same way that our astronauts 20 years ago recycled their water, the water that they peed in, the same water they were drinking in a day or two. That same idea is happening now, even in some of our communities in our western states where they don't have the 40 to 50 inches of rain that we have. So it's out there. It's just a matter of paying the price. You know, we're used to having a water bill of $50 a month, let's say.
Sure.
So that is a very small percentage of the average American's income.
Right.
Well, if you went to a water scarce district or area, they might spend half their day gathering water and getting clean water. So can you imagine using half your income every day to pay for water?
No.
So yeah, our water is expensive, and they say there's a shortage. There's not a shortage of water. It's just a shortage of people wanting to pay for their water. And I'll do a plug here for WaterStep. WaterStep is an international nonprofit that's based in Louisville that helps provide clean water in communities all around the world. And to go back to a question we talked about off air before we got started here, you said, so what do we do if the water shuts down? What do we do if there is no water? What if we do? What do we do?
Yeah, if there's that, global snap that occurs, but it's not the snap. It's a thing that shuts down all electricity. How do we get clean water?
I would say what I've done and what I would recommend is WaterStep and nonprofits like WaterStep. I think other ones have it, but WaterStep has what's called I think it's a chlorinator 1000, I think, or something like that.
Okay.
It's a device that runs off a 12-volt battery, and you take dirty water and salt and a 12-volt battery, and clean water comes out.
That's amazing.
Now, upstream of that, you would want to have a big bucket of sand that you're pouring the dirty water in. So let's go back over the scenario. So if I got to make water for my family,
right?
5 or 10 or 50-gallon bucket with sand in it. I pour the dirty water in the sand. At the bottom
it filters it.
That filters it. Sand's one of the best filters ever made. The hose out the bottom of that, I would chlorinate the water with one of these battery-operated chlorinators, and it's okay. You're done. That's all you have to do.
So we got a question here from Kenny Mayberry. What can a person do to make water drinkable with a sulfur smell?
That is one of the biggest challenges. Sulfur is a huge issue, and off the top of my head, I can't tell you other than it would be a distillation process. Sulfur is a gas. So if you were to run the water into, say, a tank, a barrel, let's say a 55-gallon drum.
Sure.
You could run the water into there and hook a vacuum pump to it. And the vacuum pump is going to create an area, the airspace above the water is going to create a low pressure zone. And so it's going to suck that sulfur out. That might help some. Other than that, you would have to go to more of a distillation process to do it. Now, historically, we haven't bothered because historic man hasn't cared that the water smelled bad. As long as it didn't kill them, they'd drink it. And sulfur water won't kill you. It just doesn't taste good.
I mean, it's sulfur water's well water, right?
Not all well water tastes like sulfur.
Oh, okay.
Only well water in these parts of the country, predominantly where there's oil and natural gas, they have the sulfur odors. The ones that are not in oil and gas rich areas don't really have sulfur in them. They're much more, they're cleaner. So your water wells out west in California that they use to irrigate all those vegetable crops that they send east out most of the year, those aren't sulfur wells. Those are clear water wells. So they don't have those odors.
So what is the future of engineering look like? I know that when you got your master, well, I'm going to have to put the glasses on so I can read my handwriting. Masters of Civil Engineering and Water Resources and Environmental Engineering. You also became, after you achieved that, and congratulations on that, by the way. I've never pursued my master's, and everyone that has, I definitely look up to. Um, what you also have kind of a side gig, side hustle as an adjunct professor for Norwich University. Is that correct?
Yes, I did until a couple of years ago. I let it go about 2 years ago, but I did that for several years and enjoyed that.
So tell us about that. What does the future of up and coming engineers look like? What was that like to be training future engineers?
Well, the program I was teaching was hydraulics and hydrology, and it was interesting. It was part of their master's program for non-engineers. So the group of students that I had every semester were non-engineers that wanted a master's in civil engineering and water. So they had to work their way through my class successfully in order to get accepted to the program.
Got it.
The goal of the program, of the class, I should say, was to help these professionals. Many of them were planners, architects, city managers, a lot of military. Help these people understand the basics of getting water from point A to point B, of treating water, of managing stormwater runoff, so that if nothing else, they could speak the language and understand what their community was facing. But to answer the other question, as far as what does the future of engineering as a whole look like, I'm not sure. But what the future of engineering with water looks like, I think is going to be pushed towards more distillation and less treatment. Like currently, we flock the water, which means we get the dirt out.
Okay.
Turbidity. The water's cloudy. Nobody likes cloudy water.
No.
So it's
Nobody.
not bad for you. It just looks bad. So we put.
It's just not a feel good to drink cloudy water.
Yeah, and it's that gritty taste on your teeth when you're done, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to settle the water, flock it, and settle it, so that the particles drop out, and then typically we hit it with chlorine and store it, and then ship it out to the client or to the homeowners. What we're going to see more of is distillation, and with the distillation, you would change phase of the water from a liquid to a gas,
right,
and from a gas back into a liquid. The reason I see this as the future of water is because it addresses what in my mind is the number one problem in water these days, which is the pharmaceuticals. Which
is the what?
Pharmaceuticals.
The pharmaceutical. Okay.
We take so many medicines as a country now and those medicines pass through us. They do their job. They pass through us. Let's say birth control pills or the little blue pill or whatever you want to talk about. All of those pills,
blood pressure pills, whatever.
All of those end up in the water, in the Ohio River.
Okay.
Or wherever you're taking it from. So they're not being removed by our treatment processes at the wastewater treatment plant, and they're not being removed by our treatment processes at the drinking water plant. There's a rule out there, I can't remember if it's 4 or 6, but there's a certain number of, every year there's so many chemicals added to the list of substances you have to treat for.
Yes.
But because of the financial pressures on our communities, there's a limit to how many new chemicals you can put on the list every year. I don't remember whether it's 4 or 6 or what it is, but there's a limit every year as to how many new regulations you can pile onto these small town water districts. But at this point, most pharmaceuticals aren't on there.
That is unbelievable. So you're telling me that when I drink tap water or the ice cubes that my ice machine is making in the freezer, I'm drinking other people's drugs.
Possibly, yes.
That's amazing. We have a question here. Tony, how safe is drinking water when purified by the little hand carry purifiers people take on backpacking or as a survival backup?
I would say that is the ones I'm aware of use charcoal, which makes it they're very safe. I have great faith in them. A charcoal filter is where I was going.
Okay.
The water you're bringing in to your house from your water line outside, I recommend a charcoal filter. So maybe the filter that goes in your refrigerator for your water feed in the refrigerator, just change it from a paper filter to a charcoal filter, and that will catch the pharmaceuticals along with everything else. So the solution is not that hard on a household by household basis. But
I'm writing this down.
The cost of trying to do something like that on a large water facility that puts out 100 million gallons or 200 million gallons a day would be monumental in the initial cost and in the maintenance cost. But on an individual level, most of the water you use in your house, you don't drink.
Right.
So put a charcoal filter under the sink, put a charcoal filter in the fridge. I don't say put a whole house charcoal filter because those get expensive, but just train yourself to drink the water from the fridge, and it's going to capture those. It's going to capture those pharmaceuticals.
So the filters, as we're winding down here, the filters in fridges, that dispense water, those aren't all charcoal to begin with. Some of them are just paper.
I think most of the ones off the shelf are paper, unless you look for the upgrade for the charcoal.
Well, I know what I'm doing tonight.
I mean, it may cost you an extra $10 every time you change them, but you change them what, 3 times, 4 times a year?
Yeah,
okay. It's cheap.
4 to 6. We drink a lot of water.
It's cheap insurance to use a charcoal filter. And to go back to the fellow's question, the same thing is true for the instantaneous charcoal filters that you can use out in the wilderness. Those are awesome devices typically.
So, Tony, shockingly, we've gone 33 minutes already. I am just amazed that we can talk about so much about water and the time just flies. As we're wrapping up in our final 2 minutes, what would you like to share with people that they can take away with them? That they say, boy, that Tony, when Sean asked him what's his takeaway, he just blew me away with his answer. Go.
My takeaway would be encourage our young people to enter into civil engineering. There's a great shortage.
Okay.
And the second takeaway would be filter your water. And if there's a third one, don't really put fertilizer on your lawn. It's okay without it, and it does a lot of damage to the ecosystem.
Well, that could be a whole show unto itself.
It could be. Tune in next time.
And there you have it, folks. Tony Young just committed to a second appearance, and we will take him up on that probably in the spring as we get closer to fertilizer season. So, Tony, thank you so much for being my guest today on Litvak Leadership Live. I've found this very interesting and fun. I hope you enjoyed yourself too, or at least it wasn't as painful as you thought that it would be.
Well, thanks, Sean. I do enjoy it. Thanks for having me on, and I hope to talk to you soon.
Yeah, and there's Tony's wife cheering him on, and everyone else. Enjoy your evening. We're taking a 1 day break tomorrow from Litvak Leadership Live, but we'll be back Friday at our regular time at 3 p.m. Until then, be blessed.
Take care.